friends, if you're thinking about college and university, one question that we always get is, which is better for me, the US or the UK? Now, better is a very subjective term depending on what your goals are for the future and what kind of environment you want to be in. But with that in mind, let's go over some key differences between the two countries. First important factor to think about is the tuition. How are you going to pay for the university and how much will it ultimately cost? Now, on average in the US, tuition will range anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 per year. Compared to the UK, it will range anywhere from $14,000 to $53,000 per year. Now, here's some key things to keep in mind when you're exploring both of them. In the US, if you're an international student and you want to attend a public university, then you will not receive financial aid because that aid comes from the government and is reserved for domestic students. Now, if you're applying to private universities in the US, then generally they'll be more generous to international students, but it's important to keep in mind how much those schools typically give to international students. It's important to do your research. Now, the UK, the tuition varies way more widely, and that's because your tuition depends on what you're studying. If you're studying something in the social sciences or the humanities, generally your tuition costs will be a lot lower. But if you're studying something in the sciences, then your tuition costs will be higher because you have to pay for labs and clinicals and other additional fees like that. So when you're thinking about both countries, think about also the cost of living in both countries. Now, if you're living in somewhere like London or Los Angeles or New York, they're all going to be expensive cities in their own way. And it's important to consider how much will it cost you to live in those cities in addition to how much tuition you're paying. Now, another important factor to consider between the two countries is the length of study. Generally in the US, an undergraduate degree will take 4 years, whereas in the UK, it'll take 3 years. Now, that's also important to consider when you're thinking about how much will school ultimately cost me. Because in the US, you'll typically study an extra year, while in the UK, you can be done with your degree in 3 years. Now, do you want to go right into working and get done with school faster? Or do you want to spend more time at university and explore things? Speaking of exploration, another important thing to consider is how you will choose your majors. Now in the US, although typically you will declare a major, you can also apply to schools as an undeclared. You don't need to know exactly what you're going to study yet. Whereas the UK, you have to choose your major right from the beginning and you stick with that major all throughout 3 years. Now what does that mean when you're studying? In the US, it's very normal for students to change their majors 1, 2, or 3 times as they explore different fields of study. Whereas in the UK, once you apply into a school and you get accepted, then usually you stick with that major for your entire 3 years. And if you want to change your majors, typically that means you have to restart your entire undergraduate education. So if you're someone who knows exactly what they want to do right now, then the UK might be a better fit for you. But if you're someone who wants to spend more time exploring what's out there and experimenting with different fields of study and different majors, then the US might be a better option for you. Finally, this last part might seem obvious, but it's important to talk about. What are the applications like and what is each country looking for? In general, both countries will make sure that you have excellent academics for any university you want to apply into. However, for the US, it's really important to understand that US universities places a bigger emphasis on creativity, leadership, and being active in your community. Now, one thing you may have heard of for applications is the personal statement, where for American universities, the personal statement is really a narrative, a story, a creative story that you're telling about your life and explains your outlook on things. Now, what's different about the UK universities is that they place a much higher emphasis on academics and theoretical knowledge. And although they also have a personal statement, they're much more interested in you explaining what you have learned throughout your schooling in terms of theory or books you've read or courses you've taken and really flexing that academic knowledge. Okay, that was a lot of information, but not everything. As always, depending on who you are, what your goals are, and your own specific situation, there's a lot of other factors that you could be thinking about. So if you still can't decide whether or not the US is better for you, or is the UK right for me, come talk to me and my team at Point Avenue. We've had years of experience helping students just like you figure out what is the best pathway for you, and together we'll make the right decision.